What up, y'all? My bad. My phone cut off. I only had like 28, whatever, how many minutes to record. Then I ran out of time. And it takes a while to upload these videos because I go to Facebook first and then YouTube. I go to Facebook first because of their copyright laws. It makes sense to me. Then I go to YouTube. But I left off talking about Bishop Hilary of Porters in France. But I do want to make a correction because I did make a mistake. Bishop Valens, he was the Bishop of Mercer, and that is in Croatia. And then the other guy, Eusebius, was the Bishop of Singadinam, and that's in Serbia. That's where that's at, Serbia. And then the last guy, what was his name? Bishop Saturninus. Bishop Saturninus. He was the bishop of a place called Arles, which is in France. Now, dude was actually an Arian bishop. Again, the semi-Arian interpretation, because the conservative view or the conservative Arian view was outlawed by the church. The difference is the first two dudes that I named, as far as Bishop Valens of Mercer and Bishop Eusebius of Singadinam, you know, they believe, this is the weird thing, they believe the same thing that Hillary believed, but they supported Bishop Saturninus. So that's the reason why Bishop Hillary sought to get them excommunicated, and he succeeded. Now, a little bit after that, he had wrote a letter. Now, according to Wikipedia, you know, he wrote a letter. This is supposed to be around 355. He had wrote a letter to the emperor at the time, which was Emperor Constantius II. And it was basically some type of scolding letter. You know, he was expressing his concern about, you know, that little Arian view and, you know, potentially affecting the West. So then, like, a year later, the emperor put together like a council in France at a place called Bizerre. So this is in 356. The weird thing is, within this council, he wrote like what they call a rescription or something like that. A rescription, basically, ordering Bishop Hillary to be excommunicated. And based on a Wikipedia article, they don't know why, for what reasons, but it sounds like so far it may be like within, you know, the letter. You know, he probably was like a little bit overly scornful, and maybe toward the emperor as well. I'm gonna say why in a second, but I'm trying to keep this in order. So he got excommunicated, and he was sent to Antioch, to a place called Phrygia. All right, during that same year. The weird thing is, like, with this is what kind of confused me. They say he was excommunicated according to Wikipedia, but he was still running his fucking church, you know what I'm saying, in France. That's what they say. He was still kind of like running the church. But then during his time in exile, he wrote like 2 main documents. I forget the names. But the important fact is that within these documents, he basically gave his own little analysis of the Eastern view within this whole little Christological conflict that was going on. So he was trying to say, like, okay, what the semi-Arians believe is not really that much different from what they believe. The only difference is as far as the words, but they basically believe the same thing in essence. I disagree there for obvious reasons. Because they all believed in God and they all believed in Jesus. But I feel like in this case, the words do matter, because again, one school of thought believes that Jesus is almost basically the same as God, as far as existing eternally and always was and always will be. The other school of thought the opposite of that. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that kind of like makes the main difference between the two. So in essence, it's not really exactly the same. Anyway, so he wrote those. About like 358, those two documents that he wrote, you know, the literature within those documents, he addressed that to the people in Gaul. In Germany and Britain, to be specific, based on what they mentioned. You know what I'm saying? So he basically gave an order mostly to the Western bishops to take into account from his perspective that because their views was not that different, that they shouldn't be too fiery in their condemnation, in other words. So, but they also said that, like, you know, even though he was in exile, you know, he still attended some councils. So like a year later in 359, for example, they had one in southwestern Iraq at a place called Seleucia. It was a council there, and he attended that one as well. And then there was another one in 360, which happened in Antioch. It happened at Constantinople. And let me see, within that council, I think he tried to, like, you know, have like a little separate meeting set up with the emperor, but he was unsuccessful in that aim. But as far as like the council in 359 at Seleucia in Iraq, you know, like the semi-Aryan view was. See, this is where it's gonna get weird for me, and this is why I can't stand. Well, I like reading, but you know, like stuff like this comes up, and I'm like, what the fuck? Okay, at this little council, right? The semi-Aryan view, or those on that side, kind of succeeded in whatever proclamations that they made. And they made it a rule or a law not to even discuss the divine substance. But then like a year later in 360, that was amended. There was another place in 359 that this council was held at, but Seleucia is the main focus here because I think that's the most important part. Like I said, a year later in 360, those amendments was overturned, and it pissed him off. And so, like, he wrote another fucking doctrine called Constantium or something like that, or In Constantium. But basically, it was just like another scolding. I don't even want to say letter, but basically, what he wrote within this literature. He was basically scolding the emperor and referring to him as the Antichrist. Not literally, because with those two earlier doctrines that he wrote around like 358, when he was trying to like find some type of common ground, he also was saying like the Antichrist is really just symbolic. It represents people that's teaching a certain doctrine concerning Christ, but not the correct one. And so it's like it's people are viewing it as light, but it's really deceit, and it's anti of what the real Christ actually exists of, as far as their teachings. So he referred to that as being the Antichrist. So because these amendments was made in like 360 or whatever, you know, that's when he got upset and referred to the emperor at the time as such in his writings. And then they say he went on and had like a lot of debates with people. But, you know, this is like they got a little vague at this point. It was like, okay, he had so many debates with people that he ended up being sent back to where he came from in the first place. So he went from being in exile to going back to France. But they didn't really provide no details as far as like, okay, at what point did the emperor himself say, okay, well, you're free from being exiled. Like, you can go back and be in communion again. That's confusing to me, as well as him still so-called running his church from being in exile. They gave no real details, you know, or no real context behind it as far as how is he able to do that. They didn't say or hint at whether he did it like on the low, or the term excommunication, you know, may not. I'm thinking like maybe like the people that put this together and wrote these articles or whatnot, maybe the term excommunication wasn't the proper term. Same thing with the whole situation as far as like in 359 with this whole Aryan or the people that's on the side of the semi-Aryans being successful at their council. Because let me see. later on, now I'm going to keep the order. Okay, so anyway, in 364, it was another bishop, but he was in Italy, and his name was Bishop Auxentius. And Bishop Hilary got him exiled or taken off his post as well. And so they say like this guy, you know, he went in front of the emperor eventually, and the emperor found no wrong because they questioned him as far as like whatever that Hilary accused him of, the emperor questioned him, and this guy answered all his questions successfully. Again, the whole background leading up to that part, they didn't say exactly how or what, aside from Hilary being argumentative, I guess, and wanted to debate all the time. What made the emperor allow him to go back to his original post in France in the first place? You get what I'm saying? And didn't have the authority to vote somebody or have them taken off of their post as bishop where they were at in Italy, such as Milan. That was the place that this guy, Bishop Auxentius, I don't want to say reigned, but you know, that's where his whole, that's where he was bishop at, or whatever. So he was unsuccessful in that aim, and then like a fucking year later, he came out with another doctrine, you know, talking about the whole little ordeal and him being unsuccessful and getting that guy deposed or whatever. So then like that same year, another Western emperor came into power. Valens, but really Valentinian, Emperor Valentinian. He came into power. About 3 years after that, that's when Hilary died. Yeah, I just want to make another note. Like I said, this is just me documenting where I'm at so far, because in the next ones, I want to go deeper into all the different councils, for example, like the one in Serdica and Servion, and, you know, compare the canons and all that. I want to go deeper into that, but this is just me, you know, tracking my steps and shit. But this is what I'm thinking, right? On Instagram, this is relevant. On Ebro's page, he had another post up there, right? And he was basically talking about the Muslim situation in America. And based on this post, he was like comparing it to like civil rights and women's suffrage and all of that, right? I wish I could remember the exact date, but it was real recent. Probably like a week and a half ago. It wasn't that long ago. No longer than a week and a half ago. But anyway, you know, I gave my opinion. I was saying, well, I don't think it's the same, blah, blah, blah. So then there was 2 people that responded to my comment. So I had a nice little dialogue with both of these individuals. One person kind of like was talking more so about the immigration. He was trying to make immigration seem like it was a real big deal as far as Muslims and how Trump made it difficult for people coming from Middle Eastern countries to come here. And you know what I'm saying? So I looked it up and all that, and I looked at the numbers and, you know, the executive orders that he put together, the executive order 13796 and then 13780. You know, in last year between January and March, when he first put the executive order in play, 13796, blah blah blah. Ooh. So I'm going back and forth with dude on that portion. The other guy that responded to my comment, we ended up, you know, kind of going a religious route. Why? Because he agreed with some of the stuff that I was saying, but his position, you know what I'm saying, I ain't gonna say he was a little radical, but he was coming a little racially insensitive. And I'm like, hold on, you know what I'm saying, I got my own opinion. I don't think this is really a big deal. Appreciate that you're agreeing with me, but I ain't no bigot. You know, I was trying to basically let him know that I do appreciate Islamic culture because I know a lot about it as far as like the initial stages of it, especially during the 7th century. So then he responded. So then I responded. And so I referenced the apostolic period, but I gave my own view as far as Jesus, right? So this is relevant to what I'm talking about right now. Now, in my earlier blogs that y'all will see on Facebook, if y'all go on my page, I was saying like as far as the the rigid Arian interpretation of Jesus. Like I always kind of view him more so in that sense. And by the way, that word doesn't mean anything racial. So if anybody get confused, look up the fucking word. There's a complete difference between Aryan and Arian. So let me throw that up in there. But I was basically saying why my views is more along that line. Here it is. This is my shit. This is why I can't believe that Jesus always existed with God and that he's anything more than a human being and enlightened human being when he existed back in the day. It's like, okay, if Jesus is eternal and he has always existed and he didn't do anything but manifest, but he was always on the side of God, that means the human form, like our body, our entire physical constitution, that's like saying we're not original as far as our design. So in other words, when you got a mouth, that's to eat. You got hands, it's to grab. You got feet, that is to walk. You got nose, that is to breathe. Inhale and exhale. You have a mouth. Same thing, right? You have eyes, that's for sight. You got optical nerves, that's for a reason. Translate images around you and all that type of stuff. I'm like, if Jesus existed as a person, but was always eternal with God, then that means the human form, not only does it mean the human form is not unique, but that means that Jesus and God had a similar form, at least Jesus. Which means if he had a similar form to a human being, he would have to be in a dimension to where he has these physical traits for a reason. Which wouldn't make sense because why would Jesus need to breathe air? You get what I'm saying? Same thing with the whole analogy about sitting on a throne. If that was actually literally true, why would you need to sit on a throne? That's like saying, battery about to die. That's like saying a chair or a throne or a seat of a sort is also not original. That means no human being came up with that. That all of those things existed prior to our existence, way before 160,000 years ago. So that wouldn't make sense. You get what I'm saying? So back in the day when I always thought about Jesus in that sense, I'm like me reading this information now today, going a little deeper into it. I'm like, I can see why I agree more so with Arius, not as being a follower. It's just the essence of his belief is almost basically aligned with mine. So that's what I was kind of communicating to dude in those blogs. But like I say, this is just a little practice stuff, you know what I'm saying? I got a lot more to say when I do the final, but I put everything together because when I get to Nestorius and his arguments, all this, the factual shit, this is just the historical facts. Like I say, the metaphysical part and the actual arguments and him dissecting what they have to say and giving his point of view and mentioning the prosopone and the osios and all that, and then the logos and the theophany and all, even the logos, for example, like the word of God. Me looking at it using my own, like off the top of the dome, even that I feel like that's more metaphysical. I don't think that literally means like language in a sense. When I read Ethics back in the day by Spinoza, I could see, like, reading this literature about the apostolic period and then what some of these people believe, I can almost see where some of the so-called radicals are coming from. So when I think about the term logos and the word of God, to me, that just means, like, mere manifestation. That's it. That's all that means. Mere manifestation. And I don't feel like that's a stretch. The whole thing about the theo, I'm going to leave that alone for now. But anyway, that's just where I'm coming from so far. I probably should say a little bit more, but that's it, y'all. You know what I'm saying? Now, y'all might look at the surroundings and be like, what the hell is going on? But look, this is just real reality right here. I don't do all the blush shit in my videos and all that extra stuff. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, this is just documenting where I'm at on the subject so far. I mean, even the whole thing about Muhammad. Because like I said, I know all that little history because I got that documented on YouTube as well. Even where he was coming from with his interpretation of Jesus and those dialogues that happened back and forth. I mean, I can already see, why a lot of what he had to say makes sense. But I ain't gonna reiterate on all that right now. But yeah, documentation. Y'all have a good night, because it's late as hell.